Hi everybody, Leslie here, back in my craft lab. I've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to jump straight in. Today's video is about ink swatching, but it's not just about ink swatching, it's about everything swatching. Last year I did a video about this, which is actually how I store all of my word dies. I like to be able to see my word dies, whether it's got a shadow or not, and I like to see the word right way round. So this is what I do. A magnet goes on the back, and my dies go in there, and I've never yet had a problem with them falling off the magnets, in case that's your first question. The system that I've got, it's a little bit like a rolodex. So it's got a bit in the bottom, and you can see each of these cards has got a little cutout on the bottom. So I'm actually going to show you how to make that. There's a whole video on this. I'll link that in the description, so if you're interested in exactly how I made this, head back to that video. When I made that video, I said this idea would be perfect for ink swatching as well. I'm going to talk about it in the video, about why I went for these measurements, but one of the reasons I like this is they don't fall out. So this is the system that, like I say, it's a bit like a Rolodex. So you can see in the bottom here, I've got this little slidey bit, and you can slide them up and down, you can flick through, and you can see I've started re-swatching all of my inks. I'm going to show you how to make it. I'm going to show you how I set up templates for all my cards. If you don't like the idea of having things in the bottom and you just want to do cards and put a stopper in, of course that'll work too. And I really quickly want to show you why I've decided to do it like this rather than the 101 other ways there are out there. I started out with one of these books with slide-in bits. So here's my Alter New inks. They do printouts. A lot of companies do printouts. So I get my inks and I stamped them all. I've done this at least twice because this was the original colour chart that Alter New did. Then they released more colours, and then you had to do it all the way again. This isn't complete because I've got more colours than this because they released more colours. So this just got really irksome. Every time a new set of colours was released, you ended up redoing the whole thing again. And the same applies to the distress inks. Every time Tim Holtz comes out with more distress inks, you had the same problem, whether it's distress ink, distress oxide. So I don't know if you can see one of the more recent ones, Uncharted Mariner, I've got down here in a box at the bottom. So it looks pretty, but you have to redo every single colour every time one comes out if you do them in that way. This is my Pro Markers swatch, but Pro Marker used to be Electroset, and then it was taken over by Winsor & Newton. So I've had to do the same thing, and I've got extra ones stuck in there. Same problem with the Alter New markers. This was the marker swatches, and then if you do one wrong, you get really frustrated, like I did there. I picked the wrong one up and put the wrong one in there for some reason. Spectrum Noir, sort of master swatch for those, but this isn't very useful. They're tiny little boxes, and again, this is the chart as well. They're tiny little boxes, and they're really hard to actually compare one over here with one over here. So while it's great to see at a glance where you've got a gap, maybe, they're not great for actually practically using. And then this against the tri-blends. Again, these aren't that useful. That if I want to compare the Fur Skin blend to the Pale Pink blend, I can't do that. It's not very easy. So that was using what the company releases. I got fed up of that system. So then this is the Jennifer Maguire system. She does ready-made prints for all the common ink lines, and then she has a blank template if it's for colours that an ink colour range that she doesn't do, so you can type your own in. But again, this gets quite tedious. If a new pink comes out, you still have to sit and shunt every single colour along. So at least you don't have to restamp them. So this works better than the method I just showed you. But again, if you've not stamped off the edge, like I haven't, oh, and my printer won't take card, it will only take paper. So I was doing these on just thin copy paper. The colour's not always great. And if you want to compare them, it's a bit easier because, yeah, you can pull them out. This is a better system. I redid all of my Alter New inks onto here. All those pages, all of those are Alter New inks. So if I get a new set of 4 that's pinks and it needs to slot in here, I have to shunt every single one of them along, which drove me nuts. And here, look, I've not even done it with this. This is one of the new colours. I think this is Lumberjack Plaid. I haven't got a printout for it, and I could not be bothered to shunt them all along. So maybe it's just because I'm lazy. This system is better, but you can only fit what you can fit on these little squares. And I wanted to be able to see, especially with things like my Distress, with it stamped, with it ink blended, with a water reactive part to it. So this is what I've come up with based on my requirements. For my Alter New inks, for each set of 4, I've done a stamp in the top corner. Now, because I've only got cubes, I don't ink blend, but there's a chance at some point in the future I might buy the larger sized ink pads and refills, in which case I might do some ink blending with them. So I've left my top corner clear so that I can do that. And then where I've got a matching marker pen, I put it on the same card. Once I'd done this, I decided actually I should have made this go right to the edge, but it's so close to the edge, I think I probably still can compare these quite well. So I think if I do any more, I will actually make my alcohol ink sample go right to the edge in the same way that the ink does. So I can see those 4 colours at a glance. I can see that I've got a matching alcohol marker pen for them. And on the back, all I've done is written in pencil, this is Alter New. The set is called Red Cosmos. This particular colour is Frosty Pink, and then I've got the colour code that's on the pen. As you can see, these all just slot back in. Where I don't have the marker pen, at the moment, all I've got on there is an ink swatch. But if I ever choose to, like I say, I could ink blend on here, I can add a pen colour to here. I don't need to redo anything. I've just got little dividers. I printed this on my label maker. So I'll show you what I've done with my Distress Oxides. I've got a stamped part, a plain ink blended part, and I carried my ink blending down and I did some water splashes on it to show how it went when it oxidized. So this is Tim Holt's Distress Oxide, THDO, Abandoned Coral. And I'm going to talk a bit more about the Distress range because obviously, like with the Alter New markers, there's a lot of things in the Distress range that you could swatch differently. So this is Abandoned Coral in Distress ink rather than Distress Oxide. I've done the same thing. In the footage later on, I haven't done this part yet. I came back and changed my mind that that's what I wanted on my personal swatch cards. But there's so many different things, and clearly I've got a lot more swatching to do. I did the same thing in Catherine Pooler. So again, this part isn't in the footage that you're going to see of me showing you how to do these, but I did exactly the same for my Catherine Pooler inks. So you could do that for any ink line that's a water reactive line so that you can show all the different options. That's just ink swatching. I obviously showed you I've done marker swatching before. So for marker swatches, it's not just those iterations in the book that I've been through. I used to do things like this. So this was my pro marker swatches, my original ones, and my first edition markers. But the same problem, every time I added like another yellow, it would shunt everything and I'd have to redo the whole thing. So I used to find these more useful. So for example, if I was doing like her, for example, go and get my pro markers that were in similar colours and say, actually, oh, that burnt orange would go with that copper, so that I could do like a nice gingery hair colour. So I actually used to find these a lot more useful than, like I say, those ones that I showed you in my books. So I decided for my swatches for my marker pens that I would do something more similar to that. So these ones are actually tri-blend markers. So these are the ones that 3 come in one pen, and I've written on the back SN for Spectrum Noir, pale pink shades, because that's the name of the pen, and I've written the name codes. If you didn't want to have a card for every single colour, you could put a colour family. So you could have, 3 or 4 colour families and divide your card up as well and have more going down your cards. So if you think that's a massive waste of card, then obviously in the same way that I did with, for example, these, you could add colours on your card. But again, if you ever add to your collection, you might need end up wanting to re-swatch them. Something that I've never swatched, I thought might be interesting too, is things like pencil crayons. I don't do a lot with pencil crayons, and I thought, well, we could do it in a similar way. So that's actually 3 different shades of pink, but these haven't got any labels on them. They just say American Crafts on them. So I think I would have to come in and label the pens and then label the colours. But if you've got the sort of pencil crayons that have got colour names, you can swatch your pencil crayons. Again, something I've never swatched, and I really think I should. I've got all these lovely gelatos, which are, I think they're a little bit like the Tim Holtz Distress crayons. Just using it as a crayon directly onto it, and then this is using it with water. So these are water-soluble crayons. This is Faber-Castell gelatos, and this is a watermelon. So I could go and swatch all of these. And then when I came to doing some sort of project, if I want to match a watercolour type background to something that I've stamped, I can pull these swatches out, and I have got more dividers to put between these, by the way. So I could come back and do that. Something else I've never swatched, and I really feel I should, because I've had these for years and these still work perfectly. And these are blending chalks, which were in fashion years ago. This is what I've done so far. I've done 2 colours, so it might be hard to tell on camera, but there's like a light and a dark in each of these. So this is the Dovecraft chalk in red and orange. Nothing wrong with those, so I could swatch those. So that would be a different way to like blend edges on cards, or if I was doing florals. But because they're not in my ink swatch books, I forget that they exist. Whereas if they're in here and I've got a little marker for them, I stand a better chance of coming back and looking. The same goes for this sort of things. My Luminart Twinkling H2Os. So I decided, oh, I'll do some black ones because I've got a few things that are iridescent. They do work on white as well. So I've just used a little scrap of watercolour card. So this is how they show up on black, and this is how they show up on white. You can either do the black and just keep all your cards white, or you could do vice versa like I've done here. So again, I've just written on the back what it is. I did that just with a white pen. Ink swatch, or swatch, not ink swatch, all of my watercolours, and I've got all those colours in there. Never swatched it. I can do WN for Winsor & Newton, and this one that I've done is Alizarin Crimson Hue, which I wouldn't have known. So I did darker and then washed it out across. Not very well. I'm not a great watercolour artist, by the way. And then I actually did a little square of wet. So, and then dropped the paint into it. I don't know, I'm sure there's other techniques with watercolours that I could put onto my swatch cards. But as I learn, if I've left space, I can add that. These are Giotto, and these are little glitter ones. The gold and silver work better on black. I can do a swatch onto black, or I can just do it onto white, and I could add those in. And I can put those, I can just have a watercolour section. Another idea of things you can swatch. So I've got these real brush pens. These are ones off Amazon. I coloured directly onto my watercolour card and then sort of washed it across. I've got these supplies. Because they're not in my swatch books, I forget about them and then I don't use them. Whereas if I have a watercolour section and a pencil section and a blending chalk section, I'm far more likely, if they're in here with my inks, to remember to go and use these things. I wanted to show you all that before we get started so you can see this is a really, really universal system that it's DIY. You don't need anything fancy. The fanciest tool I used to make this was my corner punch to cut out the little tabs for the dividers. Quick talk about containers. This is the one that I'm actually going to use. This happens to be a Crofton small fridge tray from Aldi, and I picked this one because it fits in my particular storage area where I want to put it. It's roughly 12 inches long. It says it is 37 centimetres with its handle, 11 centimetres wide, 9.8 centimetres deep. But you can see it's sort of that sort of size. I've got Kallax style units, and they're split into 4, some of my cubes, and this fits nicely on one of the 4 cubes. And I've had these before, and they're really sturdy, and they come back round in Aldi every so often. So just keep an eye out if this is specifically what you want. You could just as easily use something like this. This is an old IKEA one that came in a set in their sort of like their office organisation stuff, and this one is the stiff cardboard. This one's not plastic. So I think you could make something like this if you're handy at making boxes. You could use this type of thing. So this one has been decoupage, but this is just one of those cheap MDF trays that's got decoupage paper stuck on it. But it's a really sturdy MDF box. Again, it's not, this one's not as deep, but depending on your shelves, that might be what's more appropriate. And you could even have two of them side by side on a shelf if you've not got such a deep storage. So I would just keep an eye out for something that fits where you want to store it, rather than getting hung up on exactly what box you want to use. Pick something that you know is sturdy enough and is going to fit in your storage area. So once we've got our box, the next thing we want to determine is the size we're going to make our cards. I knew that I wanted them big enough that I could get a couple of different samples, so to speak, on those swatches. So what I did was I measured my box and worked out the best width to do two things. The first thing was, especially if you've got this type of box, they tend to be wider at the top than they are at the bottom because the sides flare out slightly. This one's not bad. It doesn't look like it's a huge amount, but when I measured it at the top, the internal measurement, so not even to the outside of the plastic, inside it's 10 centimetres at the top, and actually when you measure at the bottom, it's actually less than 9 centimetres. So that's a full centimetre, which is, you know, roughly the width of my fingernail there. That's a full centimetre less at the bottom and than at the top. So don't get caught out and measure the top and then it won't fit at the bottom. So because it's under 9 centimetres, for ease, I went with 8 centimetres. Obviously, work in inches if you're more comfortable in inches, work in whatever units you prefer. That was how I got the width. So I've gone for 8 centimetres. So I've got enough wiggle room that I'm not going to be really worried about trying to slide things back in there. And I've got enough room to twist it slightly if I need to put it on and off the runner that's going to go in the bottom of the box. So I determined 8 centimetre width. And then the other thing that was important to me is if I'm using my fairly good stamping card to do this, I don't want to be wasteful. To get 8 centimetre pieces out of an A4 sheet of paper, which is what my paper is. Again, if you've got American letter size paper, do your measurements to suit your cardstock, whatever it is you're using. So a sheet of A4 is 29.5-ish centimetres long. So I knew I could get 3 lots of 8, so that's up to 24 centimetres. And that means I get a piece of waste that's still usable, so that's still more than big enough for most things, like sentiments and things. So I can use these to still stamp on. In the other direction, because of the height of my box, it worked out just to cut it in half. So A4 is 21 centimetres wide, so I cut it in half at 10.5 centimetres. So that determined the height of my cards. So it meant that I was left with no waste in one direction and only a small amount of waste that was usable in the other direction. And hopefully you can see, so this is 10.5 centimetres and it's just a bit taller than my box, which means that I won't lose them down inside my box. You could make them shorter than your box. It doesn't matter. That's up to you. And I've already cut a whole wadge ready to do a load of inking. This is what they'll be like once they're in here. They will sit nicely in there. And they'll actually be up a bit because they're going to be on a strip in the bottom. So now all we need to do is make our little pieces that go on the bottom. So what you're aiming for is, this one's not glued yet, just so I can show you. So we're aiming for that nice trapezium shape. So what you want to do is cut your piece of card to 1 3/4 inches wide. The length, you want it to be the length of your box or a bit longer so that you can trim it down. So this is 1 3/4 inches wide. And yes, sorry for the metric people, I'm going to inches just because that's how it worked out. Now, you then want your score lines so that the outside 2 edges are 1/4 inch. The next 2 panels are 3/8 inch and the centerpiece is 1/2 inch. If you've not got a scoreboard, you can use this type of trimmer and just use the groove and a ball tool or a blunt biro, whatever you've got to score, use that as a score line. So if you've got this sort of scoreboard where you're moving along and you want to know the dimensions, it's 1/4, 5/8, 1 1/8, 1 1/2, and 1 3/4. I will put those measurements in a blog post and it'll be linked in the description so that you can see exactly the size you need if you want to do it exactly the same as mine. But it's basically, when you fold it, you need a little trapezium shape. That's the measurements that I went with. Cut it down to 1 3/4 inches wide, and then I need to score at 1/4, whoops, and 5/8, 1 2 3 4 5, then 1 1/8, then 1 1/2, and that's it. So now all I need to do is fold this up. So just do yourself a little check, make sure you've got that nice trapezium shape, and then you just need to glue along to make sure that, and hold it while it dries. You can kind of squish it one way like this so that it's all nicely in contact, just so you don't have to wait and watch my glue drying. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is actually on a longer piece of card, so I think, yeah, this is the full length of an A4 sheet of paper. You can see once the glue is dried, it actually becomes really quite sturdy, so it's not going to bend once you've done all that. If you're using one of these boxes and you're a bit worried about trying to stick something permanently in there, just put a piece of like reasonably heavy duty card, cut it so that it doesn't slide around, and you could always temporary tape or use blue tack, sticky tack, to stick it in the bottom and then stick this to it. So you can always get your box back. But I mean, this one cost me the princely sum of what? I think it was £2.99. Now that was back in November last year, so it's a few months ago, but it was £3, I think. It wasn't a lot. Now I haven't got mine going all the way to the back end because this happens to be the length of a piece of A4 paper. But one of the other ones that I've just been making, I can chop a bit off and make it the full length of the box if I want to. However, if you want, you can leave it so that you can slide them all on. I'm just going to use some red liner tape, but before you stick it down, you want to mark a centre point. You only need to do this bit measuring once. I know mine's 8 centimetres, so I'm just going to mark at 4 centimetres. And all I'm going to do is, with the short side on the bottom edge, I'm actually just eyeballing it. If this isn't perfectly dead centre, I know I've got enough width in my box that I will be able to slide these in and out. I can always adjust it slightly, but all I'm going to do to get my marking on my first card is draw around it. Literally drawn around it with a pencil. That was it. Nothing more exciting than that. And if you're a stickler for getting things dead centre, if you've got one of those centering rulers, you can check it, you can adjust it slightly. I know that that's the centre point, so mine's, it's not bad. I can alter it ever so slightly if I want to. This one will become your master layout card, so before you've stuck everything down, this is the time to mess and decide exactly how you want it. If I offer that up to there, my pencil line is on the outside of my box, and I've just straightened it up a bit, and I'm just going to cut it out, and we'll just check that it slides on and off. Now I'm just going to cut to the outer edge of my pencil line, so I'm not cutting it on the pencil line, I'm not cutting outside it, I'm cutting to the outer edge of it, purely because when it slides on and off there, it needs a little bit of wiggle room. So we're just making it slightly bigger by literally cutting on the outside of the pencil line. So the pencil line should stay on your piece of paper, on your cutout. And I didn't actually do that very well on one side, but so now if this is going to be sitting flat in our box, we can check it's going to work. And there you go. This is the point before we stick our trapezium down to determine that we're happy with where that's going to sit, because this is going to become our template. In fact, I'm going to write on it template. So I know this is the first one I made, and this is going to become what I cut all my others to match. This is meant to be the super strong, super sticky tape that once you push it down, it's not meant to come off. So I'm hoping that that will be the case. You can use hot glue, whatever you think is going to stick best, wet glues, whatever you think will stick best to your container. So what I was meaning about leaving the gap at the back, it means if you want to, you can slide them all straight on from the back. But the whole point of this is that you can pull them out when they're in the middle. You just sort of twist and it goes back on and off really simply like that. So the last stage before you can actually start making all of these is obviously to cut out all your little cards. I think I can probably cut through 2 of these at a time with my scissors. So this is the sort of thing I would take and do in front of the TV in an evening. Just literally, all I would need is my template, a pencil and a pair of scissors. And the same thing applies. Just cut to the outside edge of your pencil line and you will probably be about perfect. They don't need to be spot on perfect. Trust me. I've cut enough of them out that I know they don't need to be spot on perfect, but I'd keep your original templates so that they're all similar. I would write the dimensions of my template on there because I'll forget and I don't want to sit and remeasure every time. So you can easily create more of them and then just keep your template in the back of your box. This is the one that we're going to draw around. So the next thing you need to do is go off and look at your supplies, and you need to decide how you're going to split your swatch cards up. I came up with loads of different possibilities depending on what you've got. So on this side, I split it in half, so that's just a line at 4 centimetres because mine are 10.5 centimetres tall, but of course you lose a little bit in the middle at the bottom. I then drew myself a line at 9 centimetres, which I can divide into 3. So if you're a distress fan, there's a chance that you've got distress inks and you've got a distress oxide ink in the same colour. Now I'm going to make different cards for my distress inks and my distress oxide, but you could put them on the same card if you're short of space or if you don't have that many of one sort or whatever. It's your choice. But there's a possibility that you'll have a distress spray. You could have a distress, I think they do an embossing powder. You might have distress crayons, loads of different things that come in the product line. I could get 6 in one colour on this one card. If you're a Stamping Up fan, I know that they do matching ink, cardstock, so you could cut yourself a little swatch of each cardstock that matches. They do I think they're called stamping blends in 2 shades. Have a look at what you've got and what you want to swatch onto one card. That was just an idea that it would be easy to split this size of card into 6. I think I'm going to go with 4. My plan, at least, is for things like my distress ink, I'm going to do a solid stamp on one corner, I'm going to ink blend onto the other corner, and I'm deliberately going to have it hanging off the edge so that you can compare it to the card next to it if you want to. And then in the bottom ones, if I ever get any other things in the distress line, I can do that down the bottom here, or I can go through my marker pens and find a marker that matches. So what I'm going to do with my Altenew is exactly that. So if I'm ever stamping and then I want to come back and put some detail in, I can see that I've got the matching pen to it, because I always forget. I know I've got these things, but I forget that I've got them. And I think Altenew even do the little pads of paper that match in with the colours as well, so you could do the same idea like I just said with the Stampin' Up. There's loads of different companies that do matching inks, matching cardstock, etc. So have a think, decide how many bits you want to split it into, and then what I did once I'd decided was I just went and found, out of my nesting squares, most people have got nesting squares, the square die, and I cut one out to make sure that would fit within that little spot so that I can pop that in there. Now I can centre it or whatever. So if I wanted to do really nice, neat pieces of card, if I was matching my cardstock to it, I could do it with my little die, or I could just measure that and work out what it is. But the reason I went and pulled a die out is because so that I don't have to sit every single time and draw myself a square or do a little fuzzy patch, so that these look neat, I'm actually going to make myself a little template. So I just went and got some acetate. What I'm going to do is cut my acetate to the same size as my card. You could just do this out of card. I did deliberately cut through the card underneath as well, by the way. So now I've got either a card template or an acetate template, which you can't see. And my plan is that, to be honest, because the acetate's quite static, I don't even think I need to stick it. So without me drawing a box or anything, I've got a nice neat square. And I think if you're swatching, you need to find a way to make it as quick as possible for you. And if I go light to dark, I probably don't even need to clean my acetate in between colours. If you're worried about the ink on your acetate, which is why I did it out of acetate, I can come back and clean that just with a tiny spray of alcohol cleaner. It'll work with your blender pen, you can get it off just between each set. So I think if you go from light to dark when you're doing a set like this, you don't need to clean it off in between times, but maybe, especially with the strong colours, clean it off before you go to your next one. So now let's do our first set of solid stamping. I'm going to use my Misty to do that. All I did was go through my stamps and find a solid stamp that I wanted to use that would fit into my top corner. This happens to be, this is Hunky Dory for the Love of Stamps Delightful Decorating, and it's just got these nice paint swatchy bits. There are solid swatching stamps. You could use a floral, because I know I want it in this top corner. I'm just going to go like that and determine where it's going to go. You can see I've used this one for swatching before, because red always tends to stain everything. I can always just use one of my cards to line it back up if I do it another time. I'm not going to really wash them in between. I'm just wiping it with a lint-free cloth. And this being Distress ink, it won't be as good as Impression. Now I can hold that up against those, and I'm going to do the same with my oxide. I've got colours in my Altenew inks that go with colours in my Distress, which are really similar to colours in my Catherine Pooler, and I can put all these together if I want to, or I can separate them out. The important bit now is to label them so you don't mix them up. So there are, of course, multiple ways that you could label these. You could type them in on your computer and print out strips and stick strips on if you like the printed effect. If you've got any sort of label maker, so I've got a label maker so that I can label the ends of all my ink pads, so I do those myself, just a Brother label printer. Or you can handwrite on them. I might flip them over and on the back just handwrite on the back. The beauty of doing that would mean the front remains uncluttered, and it also means that if you're just looking for a colour, you won't know which one it is until you flip your card over. And I think there's something quite nice about it not being on the front. Up here, I can just write CPD, because it's Catherine Pooler Designs, and this is Do C Do. Now, I don't have the neatest of writing. If I don't like that, I've only done it in pencil. I can always come back and stick something on it. Tim Holtz Distress Oxide. The ones that I'm intending to ink blend with, and I'm literally just going to do some ink blending, but I know that I've got at least up to there in this top corner. Yes, it'll take time. It's one of those things you can come back and do when you're not feeling inspired. And if you want writing on the front, you can do that. The other thing, because it's a nice big card, on the back, if I do an ink blend between 2 or 3 colours, I think, oh, that's a really lovely blend, I can always have a little section that I can write at a later date on the back that Do-Si Do goes really well with Cranberry Fizz and, I don't know, Bellini. Or it could be 4 different ink brands. You can do it however makes sense to you, but it means it's all in one place, and I'm not looking through 3 different books or swatch sheets. And when I add a new one in, I don't need to rearrange everything. So it'll take time to set it up, but I can now just keep adding to it if I get more ink. And I think I forgot to say, once you've got your template with your shape on it, obviously clean it if you're going to do this. I forgot to say, of course, you can flip it over and use it on the other side as well. So if you had distressing and you had a distress spray or one of the mica sprays or something that matches, because this is one of the other reasons to do it from acetate, if you then flip over your template, that's protecting it, and you can spray through that as well. Entirely up to you. I would love to see your swatches that you come up with. If I had a matching cardstock, I would pick a punch that fits inside one of my squares. So I haven't got a square punch, but I've got this circle punch. That's what I'd do. I wouldn't bother even cutting. I would if I was doing this for a lot and I had lots of matching cardstock, I might, if I prefer the square look, I might invest in a square punch so that I could just punch a tiny corner out. So that's what I would do if I had a matching cardstock to go with them. I can always see the ink in the top corner. I didn't put these in any particular order. This was just how I shoved them in. This is obviously going to take a bit of time. I'm pretty much always going to have my ink on this top corner so that I can compare it, pull them out. So I can pull one out and compare it to another one. And then obviously if it's a blended corner, I know that it's an ink that I regularly use for blending. For the other ones, I can have something lower down so I can see if I've got matching product. So yeah, that gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. I wanted to show you my little template for my alcohol pens. On a piece of paper, this is just an old pad of paper. I just drew some lines across. Mine are 1.5 centimetres apart, and the same size as my card. I drew it across because mine are 8 centimetres wide, and I want to split it into 3 because I'm swatching tri-blend markers, so there's 3 of them. I left 1/4 centimetre at each side and split it into 2.5 centimetre wide bits. 3 lots of 2.5 centimetres is 7.5, and then the 1/4 each side. That was what added up to 8, so that's what I did. You could go right to the edges if you want to. It's completely up to you. Line it up to my little template, and just so that my template doesn't get constantly ruined, I've just got a little piece of acetate, and this is just a piece of scrap acetate, and I can reuse this 1,000,001 times because I can clean it once it's got loads of marks on it. Now, I'm using a T-ruler. If you've not got a T-ruler, just use a normal ruler and line it up to the lines you've drawn. And then this is Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend. This happens to be brush one. So I just use my ruler just to colour up to the ruler. I've now got my little blended swatch of my triad blend. For the ones where I've just got a single pen, same thing, just line it up to, I mean, you can do it on any of these, which is why I did sort of a grid so that I can sit it wherever I want. You can show variation in the same pen, and it's just a bit neater than just scribbling, if that's what you like. Again, it's your swatches, do it however you like. So very quickly, just to show you how to make the dividers, I made them exactly the same size as my basic card. You could do them in any colour. I just picked craft because I've got a fair bit of really sturdy craft card. And for my little divider peak tabs, all I did was my offcuts. Mine are about 5.6 centimetres, 5.5 centimetres. But you can make them whatever size you want. I just didn't want to measure. I've got all these offcuts, I might as well use them. I just then cut them to 4 centimetres and scored them at 2 centimetres. I decided on my first one how high I wanted it to sit. I put glue tape. I sat that one on top of that one, squared it up to it. And this is easier to do if you're trying not to get your head on camera. Squared it up against the top. And before I stuck that side down, I just went and put some more tape on there. You can obviously do this with wet glue if you'd prefer. I didn't say, did I? I just used my corner rounder to round the corners. I just printed for everything that I'm gonna, or at least for now, everything that I'm going to swatch, I've just got a Brother label maker. That's how I've made my little dividers. I realise it's going to take a while to do this if you've got a lot of ink like I have. So I'm going to come back when I've done a lot more swatching and show you what it looks like. But I didn't want to make you wait so that you could be having a go yourself, especially while it's still really quite chilly. It's still really cold in the UK. It was warming up and then it's gone cold again. So I thought it was something that we can get on with in the cold weather. Sorry if you're in the southern hemisphere and it's the opposite, but maybe you're coming into winter soon. But I'd love to see it if you do your own ink swatching using this idea. Thanks for watching. Hope it is helpful for you. And I will see you again soon with another video. Bye for now.